and welcome to the Legislative Report. I'm Laurie Bull. We're nearing the time for the governor to give his budget address outlining his priorities for the 2016-2017 state budget. The problem is there's still great disagreement over this year's budget. And here to review what's happened and discuss the possibilities for the future is State Representative Warren Kampf. Welcome.
Hi, Laurie.
I guess the first question that people want to know, and there seems to be some confusion, do we have a state budget?
Yeah, we do. So you mentioned in your opening the governor's about to give his second budget address. So that'll be for the coming year, which starts July 1st of 2016. But for 2015-16, which was his first year in office, we do have a budget. It was 6 months late, and that wasn't for lack of trying on my part and many members of the legislature, but at the end of December of 2015, the governor did sign a budget. We gave him a $30.3 billion budget, which was $1 billion more than last year's budget, had no tax increases in it. He signed it, so the money is now flowing out to the schools and the social service providers and what have you. But he has the power in Pennsylvania to change the budget when it comes to his desk. He can cut it. And he cut about $7 billion out of the state budget. He cut $3 billion from K through 12 education. This is a governor who wants more money for education, so it's ironic to me that he would cut $3 billion out of that line item. He cut $2 billion out of human services and $1 billion out of prisons, and then some others. But that, we do have a budget. But he used his line item power to reduce it substantially.
So is the book closed on the budget for this fiscal year, or is there more to be done? I believe his spokesman said there's no more negotiations to be had, but yet there still seems to be talk about trying to find a solution to fill in the money that he cut.
So, I mean, the fact is that the budget is signed, it's enacted, all right? But the strange thing is we're collecting taxes because the taxes did not change, right? Sales tax and income tax. People have been paying those all along. And our projections are that we're going to end up with about $30 billion in tax collections for this year. However, with his cuts to education and human services, we only have $23 billion of that spoken for. So at some point here pretty soon, in the next few months, I think the schools, the social service agencies, the domestic violence victim centers, and other nonprofits that rely on state dollars are going to begin again, as they did during that long period after the budget should have been done and wasn't. You know, they're going to be at a point where there's going to be a crisis, and I wish we weren't at that going to get to that point. I voted for the $30.3 billion budget because, at a minimum, we should use the tax dollars that are sent to us for those services. But we're in a situation now where, in a few months, maybe a few weeks, some new problems are going to surface.
Many things, many line items, many programs, many departments are fully funded in this budget. Can you just talk about what is in this budget?
Yeah, I mean, you know, all the departments, except for the ones I mentioned, K through 12, prisons, and human services, you know, all the departments received basically what the governor's requests were in his original budget address, you know, months and months ago. You know, whether it's, you know, community and economic development, or the Department of Health, or PennDOT, or, you know, whatever. There's so many agencies, and almost all of the line items, except for, you know, let's say it's 20 or 30 out of hundreds of line items, are funded completely, and we're not reduced. But those big ones, and boy, they're big, right? You know, human services, I think it's the capitation rate for Medicaid, and the schools, the K through 12 schools, you know, we're going to have some problems. The checks went out, billions of dollars went out the door January 1st, but as I said, there will be a shortfall. And there's a long story to how we got to this place. If you want to, I'll try to shorten it.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to ask that. I mean, obviously, we have the House Republicans, House Democrats, Senate Republicans, Senate Democrats, and the governor that all have to come to some sort of agreement, and they all have to give and take a little bit. What were the key issues that were driving the conversation, and how did we come to this point?
Right. So let me say right up, I'm absolutely in favor of an agreement, and I'm in favor of compromise. The thing for me is, I represent taxpayers. I represent people who use our schools. So there's a lot in the mix of any particular agreement or proposal that might come before me as one legislator. As people I think are aware by now, back in March, within a couple of months of being sworn in, the governor made a proposal to really, really increase taxes, really overnight by 25%. So increasing the state budget and the income and the sales tax by huge amounts. And, I'm not going to say it was a non-starter in the Capitol. We try to give everything a fair shake. But in June, when we were getting ready to ultimately enact a budget, my recollection is we ran that entire tax bill, the tax bill that would have been necessary to meet the governor's demands, and not a single Republican or Democrat voted for it. So it really was, by that point, dead letter. But I think because he cast such a far out line on the tax increases, and I'm sure he has his reasons. I've heard him say them over the last many months. Since he cast the line out so far, I think there was really no chance we were going to get there, and it made it very difficult for the Republican legislature. The House and the Senate are in majority hands of the Republicans to come anywhere near that. So then the discussion was, okay, what can we do to kind of, reach an agreement? We don't want the governor to veto budgets. We don't want him to do line item vetoes and cut programs. What can we do to get things to work? And before the deadline for the budget in June, we said, well, we could probably do some more things on revenue than, than just status quo. But we really have to attack the cost drivers. We have to attack the public pension system, which is really hammering us, huge increases there. Maybe we can talk about that a little bit later. The LCB, the liquor store system, we're kind of leaving money on the table there. If we privatize that, the projections are a couple of $100 million more a year would come in. Before we go to the taxpayers or anybody who's paying a fee to the government for more money, why can't we get those things in order? And so that was really the discussion. And then there were also individuals who really wanted property tax reform as well, reduction or elimination of property taxes altogether. So those things, pensions, property tax, privatization of the liquor stores, and then these big tax increases, they were all in the soup of our opening discussions.
And I guess when you have such large issues attached to the budget agreement, one thing changes and it affects the other thing and vice versa. And sometimes it can be hard to get all that together in one agreement, and that seems to be kind of what happened.
Yeah, I mean, leading up to June, keep in mind we had a deadline in June 30th of 2015 to do a budget.
And that was met.
We could not get the governor to agree with us or the Democrats in the House or the Senate to agree with us on a framework or a budget. So we presented a budget, passed the House and the Senate, which had $1 billion more than last year. We gave him a good pension reform bill, created the first 401k plan, mandatory in the state, and also a privatization bill. He vetoed all three of them. and he vetoed the state budget in its entirety. As I said before, he has the power to strike out line items that he didn't like or what have you, but he didn't do that. For the first time in decades, a governor, this governor, struck the whole budget. So that was reset. Over the summer, we negotiated with him, didn't really get anywhere. We tried to override some of those vetoes on some of the key social service programs that shouldn't have been vetoed, and that were actually equal to the amounts that he had proposed in March. Couldn't get a single Democrat in the House to go for that.
And those type of votes require 2/3, which we do not have that in the majority. So you would need some help from the other side on those things. Is that correct?
That's right, and we weren't able to do that. And they were sticking with the governor on that. They wanted a global deal, so okay, fine.
Right.
But then in September, we were starting to hear a lot from the schools and the social service organizations. We're running out of money. We're having to go borrow. Please. So we presented to the governor a 4-month, just an emergency funding plan, just 4 months out of the operating year, because we've got all the taxes, as I said, in the Treasury. He vetoed that one in its entirety. And then, we said, Governor, we don't think we can pass these big tax increases. He said, I think you can. We put the tax increases up for a vote in the House. Every Republican voted against it. 9 Democrats as well voted against it. So kind of a framework saying, Governor, I don't think that one's going to work. Then there was more discussion after that. Pensions, liquor privatization, a different budget, maybe some new revenue, which could have been some tax increases, were proposed by the leaders in the administration to both chambers, and property tax reduction, but you have to increase taxes somewhere else in order to do that one because the schools still are using the money. But all that ended up falling away in November and December, and ultimately we were left with, okay, now we're 6 months into this. We presented him with a good budget, and as I said, he signed it, so we have it, but then he cut stuff out of it.
So would you say, what's the process going forward now? I mean, this is kind of unprecedented, uncharted territories, uncharted waters. What is the process now? Is it to continue to try to work on some ways to address the line items he cut? Is it looking forward to the next fiscal year and using that new budget to kind of backfill what didn't happen this year? Do you have any projections there?
I mean, certainly my goal is that the money that we're going to collect in taxes this year should be used for filling those cuts that the governor made. Absolutely, I think that's the case. The schools need those monies, the social service, human service department, the prisons, they need that money. Use that money for services that people expect. So absolutely, that's a priority. I think we have to continue to negotiate. I'm disappointed that the governor says no more negotiation. I think that'll change, my own prediction. And, for next year, I sure would like to iron all of this out differently than we did last year. I really believe that we need to attack those cost drivers. It's not just all about what new taxes can we increase. And hopefully we can sort all of that out so that we don't repeat what happened this year, because no matter what, that was not a good thing.
Well, we're going to talk about one of those cost drivers after the break. And let's take a quick break. And when we return, we'll be discussing one of the biggest expenditures at the state and local levels, and that's pension costs. Legislative Report will return in just a moment.
Did you know that on May 25th, 1905, the Statue of Commonwealth was installed on top the Capitol Dome in Harrisburg? Simply called Commonwealth, the bronze cast statue weighs in at 4 tons and stands over 14 feet high. In 1904, Roland Hinton Perry was chosen to sculpt this artistic figure, which he referred to as the symbolic embodiment of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Capitol architect Joseph Houston designed this bronze masterpiece with her right arm extending to symbolize kindness and with her left arm holding a ribbon mace symbolizing justice. During her decades of overlooking the city of Harrisburg, Commonwealth has endured periods of harsh weather leading to her deterioration and need for restoration. Prior to her refurbishing in 1997, Commonwealth was last restored in the 1940s. Under the direction of Rathgeber Goss Associates, the Commonwealth statue has undergone restoration and regilding to the form originally envisioned by her sculptor. Since being replaced on top the Capitol Dome in 1998, Commonwealth now graces the State Capitol building. Now you know.
Did you know that there are 6 ornate bronze chandeliers hanging in the House chamber? The 4 large chandeliers are estimated to weigh 3 tons each. Yet these iron and brass fixtures painted in 18-karat gold manage to dangle effortlessly. It takes 168 light bulbs to light the large chandeliers and 84 light bulbs on each of the smaller chandeliers. As you can imagine, changing the light bulbs when they burn out is far from easy. Workers must build scaffolding in order to reach their 1,450 light bulbs. Today, special, long-life, low-wattage energy-saving bulbs are used to lessen the amount of times that the light bulbs will need to be replaced. Now you know.
And welcome back to Legislative Report with your state representative, Warren Kampf. And we've been discussing the state budget, and in particular now we want to focus a little bit on education. As you had mentioned prior, there was a full budget passed. The governor did reduce some funding for education because he'd like to see more. He wants to continue negotiating on that. But I guess the question to ask is, without true pension reform, will there ever be enough money for the education budget? Will it ever be satisfied if pension is not dealt with?
So, I mean, pensions is a huge issue for K through 12 funding. And it's a huge issue for just the state budget generally. To give people a sense, this year, we were actually at the point where of all the taxes we collect as a state government, 10% of that is going in to make our pension payment. So 1 in every $10 of income and sales tax is going to just make our annual pension payment. Now people would say, well, why don't you just reduce pensions? Certainly we have people who are retirees who have expected this money to come out. The benefits that have been offered to state and school district employees, they've relied on those benefits even if they're still working. That's what they expect to receive, so there's that. We've also had court cases that basically say for state government and school districts, it might be unconstitutional. In fact, they have said at times when changes have been made, unconstitutional to change a current worker's benefit. Mm-hmm. So we're paying these very large costs. And just to give people some perspective, each working person in Pennsylvania to pay our pension liability over the next 30 years owes $30,000. So that's a big number for just one line item for the next 30 years for each worker in Pennsylvania. So that's a huge number. This year, our pension costs went up, I want to say, $600 or $700 million, which is all the new revenue we get from taxes just because of growth in the economy. The economy's not growing that much, but when it does grow a little bit, we get some new tax revenue just because. And all of that is being eaten up by that fixed cost of pensions. So to your point, all right, what else in education might cost a little bit more money? If it's a healthcare policy or books or computers or the utilities or whatever it is, those costs have to be made up somewhere else because pensions is so big a problem that it's eating up all the new dollars. So I think we do need to have a reform, but I want people to understand that the reform, which is to go for new hires, this is what I propose, to a 401k type system, it's a very important change. The reason it's important is that we won't ever get into this situation again, but we are in this situation, and that reform is not going to change this problem.
So it does not change the money that is owed, so to speak.
Right, and that's a little bit of an overstatement. The one bill that we put on the governor's desk this summer, which he vetoed with pension reform, did make some changes to current employees' future pension benefit, kind of around the edges. And there are some savings in that, billions of dollars. But when you're talking about a system which over 30 years costs the taxpayer $200 billion,
Yep.
even if your savings are $10 billion or what have you, which sounds like a lot, the lion's share of it is still left for us as the taxpayers to pay. And we are trying. Look, we put more money in this budget into K through 12 education than ever before. This last budget that the governor signed had $300 million more than last year for K through 12. And that's after we made the pension payment. So it's money that would go into the classroom. And it was true last year. We made a bigger commitment last year to K through 12 than the year before. So we care about education. We want it to be funded. But we also think, I think, that we need to get out of this, this public pension system, which is being so damaging to everyone involved right now.
What are the differences in opinion, generally speaking, between the governor, the Senate, the House? What's preventing this from getting accomplished, I guess I should ask?
Well, right. So we were talking a little bit during the break, you and I, that this reform movement, it's a national thing, has been going on for at least 5 years, maybe longer. And I've had this bill to go to a defined contribution plan or a 401k plan for that long. Now, finally, after 5 years, which for something as big as this is, maybe a reasonable time period. People have to get comfortable with it. Has to make sense. We passed a bill out of the House and the Senate for the first time. I think it was historic. And in some cases, we actually made national news because of what we did. There have been a few other states, Rhode Island and Utah and Michigan and some others, who have made changes like the ones that we put on the governor's desk, but not everybody in the country has done that, and so that was a good piece of legislation. Why does it take so long? Well, of course, there are special interest groups, the labor leaders, the public labor leaders for the teachers union and for, the state workers. They really do seem to oppose any change that doesn't keep intact that core benefit of the pension for even their future hires, the people that aren't even working for the state or the school district. And they fight tooth and nail. And I think it's not news that they have a lot of power in the state capitol. So that is an issue. Secondly, anytime you're talking about messing with a system of this size, I think our pension system is maybe one of the top 5 largest in the country. Just we're a big state. Mm-hmm. You're involving professionals, the pension fund people, the actuaries who analyze the system in that process. And when the actuaries come out and say this bill will cost this or this bill could do that, people pay attention to that. And the details really do matter. So that can also be a part of it. And then, of course, right, then you have the House and the Senate, right, just 2 different bodies. No guarantee they have the exact same priorities, or they might want to change details, and then throw in a new governor. And also, a governor who elected as a Democrat is more likely to be, closely connected or affiliated with the public labor unions. And bringing all that together and making it work, I think we got close, actually, here in the last couple of months. We got pretty close to a good bill, but we're not quite there yet. And as you mentioned, a lot of other things got in the way, tax increases, and so on and so forth. So we have to figure all that out still. Would you say, though, that's the number one issue on your agenda as you see it? It is absolutely an important issue, and I've spent a great deal of time on it, and I'm willing to spend more. I just want to make sure that what we do makes sense, and that we're not just doing it so we can talk. Mm-hmm. I think we need to do something, and so I'm ready to get back at it when it's clear that's going to happen. Is it a fair argument to make to those who may be opposed to making any changes that
if nothing is done, their pension that they've worked for and contributed to may not be around when they need it. Is it that dire?
I mean, I think, look, we are making our payments on the schedule required by law. And we're getting very close to what the actuaries, the kind of the financial analysts of the pension funds expect. So I don't believe that we are, going to fall off the cliff. However, we are one of the least funded in the country for a big system. Some of the bond rating agencies, the Moody's and what have you, have downgraded the state's finances, I think in part because of this pension crisis that we have. So I can't make sort of blanket statements, but it does concern me, and that's why I put so much time into it.
We only have about a couple minutes left, so do you want to just forecast as best you can where we go from here, both in regards to pension and the budget process going forward?
I mean, as we talked about in the beginning, the governor is going to make his address for next year's budget in just a couple of weeks. So we're going to have appropriations hearings, as we do every year on the proposed budget. The agency heads, all of the agency heads will come before us. I'm on the Appropriations Committee. This will be my second year going through these hearings. So we'll go through that process. I certainly hope that we iron out in the next few weeks or few months at the latest that hole that the governor put into this year's budget. That's a problem, and I don't want to get to the point where we're at crisis mode again. But in terms of predictions, I can predict he will make an address to the General Assembly on the 9th, and those hearings will take place. Beyond that, I'm not sure.
Anyone's guess at that point?
Well, I mean, I think the same dynamic exists, and we have
Right.
to find some middle ground.
Yeah.
We
yeah.
do.
Well, thank you so much for spending time with us today and updating your constituents on this, because it's hard to tell even from the news coverage exactly what is going on. So it's good to hear we have a budget, but there is work yet to be done.
Thank you, Laurie.
Sure. And if you have comments or questions about these or any other legislative topics, Representative Kampf's contact information will be on the screen in just a few moments. Thanks for watching, and join us again for Legislative Report.